welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited about today's guest. We have on writer and director Lina Suh. Lina, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, looking into you, you had a short that actually got a development deal with Sony and HBO Max. That's like so exciting. You helped develop Dr. Brain, which is a Korean drama. So, I mean, you're out there, you're getting things made. And I wanted to get a little bit of your origin story and kind of what brought you to your latest work.
The origin story. That's always a hard question. It's how far back do we go? Well, I mean, I've always been writing as long as I can remember, learning to write essentially. And so I think, when I was reading children's books, I wanted to write children's books. And then when I was reading novels, I wanted to write novels. And when I started watching movies, I said, maybe I'll write that. So it kind of started from there. And so I was writing and directing little plays, probably 15 or 20 of them by the time I got to college. And then I went to college for dramatic writing. And so you learn both screenwriting and playwriting there. I ended up focusing in screenwriting as well. I was trying to write for a while post-college as well. And it's obviously very hard. I never had kind of that environment growing up. I was really just writing and doing a lot of odd jobs, trying to get things going. And then I think at a certain point, a good friend of mine who is a filmmaker said, why don't you try directing? And I said, oh, I can't do that. And I don't think I ever realized that when I was directing these little plays that I was actually directing. It was just my creative outlet that I had to write something and I had to see it happen. And so even though I was telling everybody around me, okay, this is how you should say the line, or this is where we start the music, or run around in this way, I didn't realize I was actually directing. So anyways, since I had a bunch of friends that were filmmakers, I kind of asked them, oh, will you help me try shooting this one little scene from a feature that I'd written? And so then I ended up doing that, and it seemed like maybe I could try doing this. And I ended up going to grad school for production. That was still a learning curve. I didn't know if I could really do this at the beginning, but I think as I started to kind of work with really good, talented people around me, I was learning a lot, and eventually made a few shorts that helped my career along a little bit here and there. And then eventually had the pitch that we had sold to HBO Max, as you mentioned, as well. And it was actually
based on a short, right?
Yeah, well, so the short was also something that another now non-existent company had bought the pitch to. That was something based on a prior life experience of mine, kind of an odd job that I had back when I was a struggling writer in New York. And we reset it in LA, but a friend of mine and I, we had made a different short together, and we were just trying to think of other ideas that we might want to develop together. And throwing around different ideas, experiences that we had. This was a bullet point. And then another friend of ours wanted to pitch the idea to the company he was at the time. And so we did that. They were looking for one more web pilot to have produced. And we ended up being able to co-write that short script, and I directed it.
That's cool.
And then it was a lot of fun. It was very kind of crazy because it was just a couple of months out of grad school, and I'd never really done the whole pitch thing before, and for that to kind of move forward in that way. And then we ended up redeveloping it later as a half hour, since it was like web series were a real thing at one point, and then they were kind of on their way out. And so then the company was like, let's actually take this out as a half hour. So then we continued to develop it, and we ended up selling that version as well. So that was
when you wrote that short of Good Face, were you just writing and directing because you wanted to make something, or were you thinking like, I'm going to make this thing so that I can get it out there and try and get it optioned and made?
Well, it was one of those things where the setting takes place in the Korean beauty industry and the K-beauty industry. And so it was kind of a receptionist job that I had right after college. And so I remember at the time, it was a little bit of a code switching life that I was living, because I was hanging out with all my very liberal art school friends. I had also grown up partially in Korea. And so then suddenly I was hired into this office where everybody was Korean, and I was suddenly having to be very Korean with them. And then I was being very, American and artsy with my
Oh
school
yeah.
friends and things like that. And so, anyways, it was a little bit of a mind F. And so I remember thinking at the time, oh, I want to write something about this someday. Many years later, when my friend and we were banding about ideas, I remember saying, well, there was also this idea that I was wanting to do someday.
That's cool.
Maybe it could be one of our ideas that we throw on the page. So yeah, so it was something that I've always wanted to explore, but I didn't necessarily know that that was the route that it would end up taking.
That's fascinating. Because I love that, you just had this burning story within you, and then you wrote it into this really kind of great short that you were able to get out to Sony and get it out to HBO. So
Mm-hmm.
from there, did you kind of start making some rounds, getting on television and kind of getting more work coming to you?
For sure, it was definitely the start of multiple things. I mean, the development process itself was also long. We talk about it in this kind of truncated fashion, but it did take a couple years from when we sold the pitch for the short, the web pilot version, to our development through to being able to take it out on pitches for the half-hour version.
Yeah.
Probably about a 2-year term, and we had more producers come on
Wow.
board. We had a pretty known actress who became a producer. Sony came on board, and then we went around the town for, I think we did close to a dozen pitches to everywhere. And I think at that point, when we had both Showtime and HBO Max were interested at the time, and so it kind of became a competitive situation, which was again very exciting and something that I'd never experienced before. And that was actually when I did end up getting represented. I got an agent and a manager, and that also helped me along as well. They were able to, give me different meetings and things like that. And I've been wanting to work in Korea more as well. And when the pandemic hit, that was when we were writing the pilot based on the pitch that we had sold to HBO Max. And since nobody was actually meeting in person, I was like, well, I'll just do some of the writing from Korea for about a month and
That's
a half.
awesome.
Yeah, and that became a year and a half that I just stayed there. And I had told my reps that I would love to be set up on meetings or any jobs in Korea, not thinking that it would actually lead to anything because I didn't know, what their connections were in Seoul. But luckily, I ended up having some lovely meetings and also started on Dr. Brain, etc. So
So I
that was
have
kind of
not had
that
the
journey.
I have not had the pleasure of watching Dr. Brain, but I do really enjoy
Mhm.
Korean dramas. Hellbound, Squid Game, those types of
Yes.
shows. I'm in it. I'm watching Hellbound season 2 right now, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
leave me alone. I'm in my stories. What do you think? Because I have my own opinions, but what do you think is really making these Korean dramas, these Korean horrors and suspense really start to pop with a broader audience?
Well, I do think that the availability of streamers does help. I think it creates a platform that is available to a lot of audiences around the world because I think a lot of these stories have been around these incredible creators in Korea and have had a lot of success within the Korean market itself and within Asia, even Latin America and different places around the world. But I think just this kind of intense global appeal has largely been made available by the different platforms that are coming about. And I mean, for example, even Dr. Brain, the creator of that is an incredible Korean director Kim Ji-woon, who has, all of his films have been on the Criterion Collection and things like that. And so,
That's cool.
yeah, and so he directed the entire first season and things like that. And so it was kind of following his vision as well. And so, and similarly for Squid Game too, that director also had directed multiple big films in Korea. And then that was a series that kind of was able to take take the world by storm in that sort of way. So I think it's been around in different ways, but they're able to take different sort of risks and actually show the more of the worlds of
Yeah.
what they're capable of.
For me, when I get lost in them and why I love them so much is they take really in-depth like character study
Yeah.
so that you really start to understand who these characters are. You know their motivations are clear, and they just start peeling these layers away throughout the season, and they hit you with this killer twist you don't see coming, and it blows
Yeah.
my mind. Having being someone who teaches screenwriting, and then I see that and I was like, oh my god, why didn't I see that? And you go back and you see all of the little like flags that were pointing towards the way of this
Hmm.
nice twist, and that's personally why I really enjoy those shows, those genres.
They are very fun.
So tell me about what you've got coming out.
So, my film, Meeting You, Meeting Me, it's my first feature. It's very different from the horror genre. Actually, it's a very intimate story of friendship between two women from very different backgrounds who meet by chance, and a friendship evolves unexpectedly, mostly over the course of a day. It also does have a Korean element because one of the characters is a Korean American woman. But how it kind of came about was not long after I was out of grad school. I had made a couple shorts that had helped my career along, and I really wanted to make a feature, but that's still a very difficult thing to get made, and I didn't have a ton of resources or network in the
Yeah.
industry to feel like it could facilitate that as quickly as I wanted to. And granted, this also took a while, but I pulled friends from grad school that I had worked with, had wanted to work with, also two actresses that I already knew that I had been wanting to do something more with or something with, and we kind of started the journey in that way with very little. And so, the conceit always is you can take two characters, put them in one location, and make something more feasibly. And so I just knew that I had to make really strong characters and make a strong relationship story. And so since I knew I had two actresses that I could trust with the material, that's kind of I fashioned these characters in this story with their energies in mind.
That sounds fascinating. And having the achievements that you've achieved kind of blows my mind that even hitting a status that you have, it's still hard, still a challenge to put a feature together. Is eye opening.
Thank you. When I talk about these things, they are kind of in tandem. So when I started on this project, I hadn't sold anything to HBO Max or anything like that at that
Right.
time. I was just out of grad school. I was trying to do all these different things, and so the web pilot thing that came along for Good Face, that was maybe 2 or 3 months after I graduated from grad school, and so I was trying to get that going, but after the few months of working on that, and we had delivered it and they loved it, but at the same time there was still a term of maybe a year and a half or so before we were taking it out again. And so in that
Wow.
time it was kind of like I still have to make something, and I was doing other jobs as well. I was like, well, I have to keep making things in order to
Yeah.
push along that part of the career that I want. And
Wow.
so there was the pandemic that also kind of
Oh yeah.
held things up for a while. And so this film didn't actually get finished until it started before the pandemic, and it was finished after the pandemic.
Wow.
And then again, I had other jobs and kind of career
Yeah.
milestones in between. And so it was not easy, but easier potentially to finish it after the pandemic just because of the different things that had happened in my trajectory.
So where is the film? Do we know what distribution is yet? I guess that's what I
We
should
do
ask.
not. Hopefully, we find distribution soon, and that it can live on a platform next year so that more people can see it. It's been in several festivals this year. Most
Oh,
recently, it
good.
was at La Femme International Film Festival, where we were the Best Feature nominee. I was very
Congratulations.
surprised and excited.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. And we are starting a theatrical run this Friday, November 15th, for a
That's
week.
incredible.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So it's one of those awards qualifying theatrical runs, basically,
Yeah.
which it qualifies us for, the Academy Awards
Yeah, of
or the
course.
VGA Awards,
Yeah.
etc. And I think it's for us because even those campaigns are such massive things, and the film itself was made on such a shoestring budget that it's not that we're expecting to get that, but it is largely for exposure and to get it to more people, hopefully more people to pay attention so that also we can get more distribution later on.
That's amazing, though, that you're able to make that work to get it to be qualifying for that. That is so cool.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, it was not something that I expected even when I was starting to make it or even during this journey. It came up because of a festival. If I tell a little story, is
Sure.
that from one of the festivals that we were at, we were one in San Francisco called Cam Fest. Wonderful, wonderful festival. Because we don't know very many people in San Francisco, we were nervous that the theater wouldn't have anybody in it, but I think they do an amazing job. It's a very locally San Francisco Bay Area loved festival, apparently. Our theater was full, and so we were very happy and surprised. And people
That's
were coming
cool.
up to us. Yeah, people were coming up to us afterwards to tell us how they had really been moved or enjoyed the film or how they saw their friendships in the film. But one person who came up to us, he was also saying how much he had been moved, and he told us that he was a co-founder of Rotten Tomatoes, actually. And so yeah, it was like, oh my goodness. And I mean, they sold the company years ago, so they're not directly involved with the company, but he also wanted to introduce us to some people he knew and things like that. And so it kind of evolved from there. Our co-founder wanted to sponsor another San Francisco screening because he just wanted to keep sharing it. And so it kind of started from there. And then as we continued to talk and plan that event, the idea of doing an Oscar qualifying theatrical run in LA came up as well. And
That's
so,
cool.
yeah. And so our San Francisco screening was also a success. It was a full house of largely people that we didn't know as well. And then he was also able to help us find more sponsors and support so that we could put up this theatrical run in Los Angeles. So we're very excited. We have several very cool Q&As planned with some very special guests. So hopefully people will come out to the Los Angeles screenings as well.
Well, it sounds like they will. I mean, it sounds like you get a full house no matter what, which is pretty fantastic. I mean, you can't have a bigger compliment than that. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you if you have any advice for any screenwriters or directors out there that are, in the middle of their journey right now, trying to get stuff made.
Oh my God, I don't feel like I'm in a position to give advice, but I do keep saying this, which is something that I just always have to tell myself, is to just keep writing. And I think, I mean, it sounds so plain, but I think a lot of times we don't write because we don't think it's going to be perfect. And so we're afraid to put things down on the page. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times you just have to start where it's not going to be good and it's going to
Yeah.
look like blob and vomit, but it's definitely where you begin. And so just keep putting it down on the page, even though it's not perfect. Don't be
God,
precious
I
about
feel
it.
like you're speaking to me right now because I'm in the middle of writing a TV pilot, and the other day instead of writing the pilot, I changed all the door latches in the house.
Well, I
So
mean, sometimes that helps too. That kind of gets your thoughts going sometimes,
yeah,
changing door latches. You're like, oh, wait, that character should have done it that
yeah.
way.
It's like I know I know I'm getting into it when it's like I don't want I just trying to avoid sitting down. But no, you're absolutely right. You got to sit down, make it happen, because then the magic can start to flow. Before I
Mhm.
let you go, is there anything I should have asked that I didn't?
I don't think so. Yeah, just I hope people come out to see our film and bring their friends because it's about friendship.
That's awesome. All right, Lina Suh, thank you so much. The film is meeting you, meeting me. Have a beautiful rest of the day.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day.